Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host, Bryan. New week means new theme. We're going to be looking at big shifts this week, which is songs that move from one style, hopefully drastically, to a different style. I'm really looking for these large, sweeping changes between one section of the track and another. We're going to be starting off with Opeth. A double track entry. We have Coil and Heir Apprentice. I'm going to assume that they go together in some sense. That's the reason why they were presented to me simultaneously. So let's dive into this, starting with Coil from Opeth.
She told me why. She told me lies. Always take care of it. I told her how I've always
Really beautiful timbre on the higher strings. In fact, everything about this guitar is just really gorgeous. The tone it has and the way it's produced.
When I get out of here, when I leave you behind, I found that
Nice little bass line there.
it's passed us by. When I get out of here, when I leave you behind, I found that the years passed us by. And I can see you right into the fields of sorrow. Yes, I can see you right into the fields of sorrow.
When you get out of here, when you leave me behind, you find that the years passed us by. When you get out of here, when you leave me behind, you find that those years passed us by. And I can see you.
Yeah, really beautiful writing all throughout. I'm loving all these layers of counterpoint that are added, and the underlying elements are just gorgeous. That little guitar riff right there, yes.
Can see you riding through the fields of sorrow.
We have that really nice harmonizing too. There's an instrument on the right that did the same thing the vocalist did. Oh, here's the shift. I hear the rumble. I was kind of hoping that this piano idea would carry over something from our last song, either the melody itself or just the chord progression. And yeah, it's not. I think this is the first time I've heard Opeth doing growls. I really love the push and pull that they're creating rhythmically with these ideas. Yeah, very cool. Very Dave Mustaine style of solo. Really good flow with the way that the solo progresses from one idea to the next, but also having repeated ideas so that there's a connective tissue between, aspects in the end of the solo compared to the beginning. The bass guitar here with the bass kick is just super punchy. Just that real monotonous grind right there, just rolling it in. there's this really neat idea going over here, was going over here in the right headphone that I really wish had given more prominence. Talking about tightening of the chest. Love that bass line right there. Uh, I talk about expectations every once in a while on this channel on how important they are for appreciating a first time reaction. The whole idea of first impressions, right? If you go in with no expectations, or your expectations are exactly what you're going to get, you're going to have a more positive reaction to the song than if you have expectations that are not met. And there's a lot of really cool aspects to this song. In fact, one thing that really stood out to me is how close to this style modern Ginger is. I've always heard people compare Ginger to Opeth, and particularly Tatiana's growls. But the couple of times you guys have showed me Opeth, it just it wasn't in that area. Like I said, I think this is the first time I've heard Opeth with screaming, and I think it's the first time I've heard this type of heaviness from them as well. But I can 100% see the lineage now. So that's really cool. Like I said, there's lots of interesting ideas in here that we'll get to, of course. But because it's big shifts week, I was expecting some big shifts. And I mean, technically, we move from solo acoustic guitar to huge low end metal-y ideas. And that is a really big shift in volume and weight. But maybe this just wasn't communicated well by me. I was hoping for stylistic shifts. There is a huge dynamic shift here, and that's for sure. I mean, even when I was watching the volume, they actually do use actual volume dynamics in here. The quieter, sparser sections they don't just sound sparser, they actually are quieter. We actually lose about 10 dBs or so of volume in some of these spaces. Even our intro track was barely hitting the maximum volume I allow the music to be in the videos. Um, so, there's a lot of dynamic qualities in here, and they do create dynamic shifts in volume, width, and weight. I was just kind of hoping for stylistic ones, and maybe I just didn't make that clear. So hopefully the rest of this week I'll have my expectations set properly to expect any kind of big shift. Um, but halfway through the song, I kind of realized that moving from track one to track two, and some of these sparser sections in track two, into the bigger ones, those are the big shifts. It's the reason why this duo of songs was given to me. And that's when it clicked for me. I was kind of let down. I was like, oh, that's what that's why this was recommended. And I got a little disheartened there, and I think that it has colored my appreciation of this song a little bit on a first listen, of course. The more times you listen to something, you might hear things you didn't, you come into it with the right mind space. Like, there's a lot of things that can happen on future listens to this, but yeah, just this one right here, we're going to get into the objective elements of it, what actually happened, what led to some of those ideas that made them so cool or so big or so major or whatever. Um, but yeah, I'm a little let down after hearing this, and I think that in another context, I would have a very different emotional relationship to this song after a first listen than I did right now. I just want to clarify that in case anybody, is looking at it like, man, how did this guy not headbang through all that? Or, I thought this would be right up his alley. And that's why. I think my headspace was wrong for it. Um, so, yeah, just to kind of clarify that a little bit. So, what's going on here? I want to talk about Coil first while it's still kind of in my memory. And then we'll move on to Heir Apprentice. So Coil was gorgeous. I loved everything about. Oh, this might have colored some of it too because I did really love Coil. Heir Apprentice was the one that kind of hit me a bit negatively. I think Coil really set themselves up for something very different, and we'll get to that. So Coil is just gorgeous. It is everything I love about great writing. We don't really have a strong foundational element in that there is an underlying just static idea of holding out a note or moving chord progressions. Almost everything in the song is moving. They all have movement to them. We're dealing with quarter notes and eighth notes and triplets. There really isn't a lot of space for just holding out a tone underneath everything. So a lot of our chordal ideas are going to come from the dyads and triads that are created through the multitude of instruments that we're getting. So there's a lot of layers here to kind of fill that in because the song absolutely cannot feel empty. I mean, there's so much going on here, of course, that I get the idea they didn't want it to feel empty even without this foundational element that can hold everything up. So we have like 4 or 5 instruments at a time all doing these moving ideas, right? We have our guitar that's doing it's doing this really interesting idea where it's 3 3 3 3 4, where we get like I don't know if they're triplets. I think it's just groupings of 3/8 notes, which would give us 16, which would be 2 4 4. Yeah, that sounds about right. 2 bars of 4 4. And I really love this idea, right? Because we have this constant do 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 do. We have this constant movement, and at the end of that four repetition, then we get something that was, instead of 3 notes, we moved to 4 notes, and it was something like kind of like bounces around. It doesn't follow that rising idea. It sort of bounces around a little bit. So it kind of pushes against the 3 by giving us that extra note. We now have a group of 4. And it also pushes against our that groove we were in, the rising groove, and now we kind of shift around, like we come up and down and hit in the middle and drop down again, almost like falling thirds, I think is what they were going for. So it's a really nice contrast at the end, and it actually took me a while to figure out what we were in. Eventually, I got to the point where I was like, oh, these are 16 beats or 16 hits. Like, well, if these are eighth notes, well, that's 8 beats. Well, that's 2 bars of 4/4. We must be in 4/4. So I started counting it out. Yeah, 4/4 fits really well. It's just because of that huge contrast at the end, it doesn't feel like 4/4 because a lot of it feels like 3/8, I guess technically is what it feels like to me, or a really fast 3/4. But yeah, it definitely feels like we're in a grouping of three. And no, that last oddity really solidifies it as being in 4/4. So we have this moving idea underneath, and then we get these other ornamental ideas. There's like flutes at one point, I think, and strings, and there's this other idea, and honestly, I'm kind of forgetting most of the instrumentation on there, but it was just a lot. We heard a lot of really interesting timbres that we didn't bring back for Heir Apprentice. And I'm probably going to say that a lot. Things we didn't bring back in the next track because it is kind of a sore spot for me. Like I said, this opening track really set them up for something that they weren't planning on delivering on. Um, so yeah, beautiful guitar line, beautiful ornamentation, and then above all of this, we have our vocals. We shift between a male vocal that we start the track with, and we end the track with a female vocal. And I'm really interested to get to the lyrics on this one and see what's going on here. And these vocal lines are just huge and moving, right? Moving emotionally. There's a lot of emotive elements to them in little wavers or little runs in the line, while also holding out these huge moments, these key notes, just leaning into them and ensuring that the listener is getting the full emotional aspect of this track. You get to hear all of this just gorgeous beauty around it, and then these powerful vocal lines. And all of this is lined up with harmonizing elements. We occasionally have two ideas that will harmonize. They'll be alongside each other. There's also a lot of counterpoint here where they'll harmonize on dyads, but kind of go their own way for a little bit before lining back up on some key notes and then going their own way again. It's just really gorgeous melody writing from top to bottom in every aspect of it. It is just this warm, gorgeous idea with so many timbres, and it really speaks to me, right? So what I took out of this, leaving the section, was lots of layers, lots of voices, gorgeous melody writing, and strong harmony writing with strong melody writing with counterpoint and strong harmonization. We leave Coil and we get struck in the face with this heavy guitar stuff. I don't remember if we had started with a riff or if we just started with a full chord and just allowed it to ring. But yeah, the beginning of Heir Apprentice just starts out real hard, real heavy, smacks you in the face. Definitely a huge shift, both in tone and atmosphere and weight and volume. And we progress on a little bit and we introduce some of our core elements that we're going to see being presented throughout most of the rest of this track, which is fairly linear. Being that I had to remember, 12, 13, 14 minutes of music here, I don't know that I'm going to be able to speak about each section individually like I would on a shorter or more repetitious track. I think this was a Rhapsody. I don't really recall any section that I remember an earlier idea from, so I think we just completely linear, just always moving to new ideas, never cycling back to something. I could be wrong on that. Maybe there is a chorus that we cycle back to once, but it feels fairly linear to me, which is like you're asking me to remember 9, 10 different ideas of 12 minutes of music. It's just not going to happen. My brain is not that good. So I'm going to be talking about ideas mostly overarching here. So in this section, not this section, the song, Heir Apprentice, we end up having guitars, bass, drums, and vocals. There are a couple of sections where we hear some other ideas. I think there is a momentary use of strings, a string section, I should say, not just strings in general, a string section, all unified doing one thing. And there is some sound I talked about there at like the 9 minute mark of Heir Apprentice that was off to the right that was doing some really neat counterpoint, but I couldn't tell what it was. It was being drowned out and it was here and gone in like 4 bars. So I didn't really get to, really appreciate what was going on there. And that's it. It's more of these small ornamental ideas. It's the rock setup that really provides the basis for this entire track. Our guitar bounces back and forth between two ideas. It's either doing a melodic riff or it's holding out these tones. And sometimes the tones are held out as like whole notes, and sometimes they're rhythmically placed, but it's just that one note. Like there at the end, I had talked about that monotonous, just. I mean, it is just one note being held out for a long time. We just chop it up into a lot of attacks, and that's what I mean. Like sometimes it could just be strum it and let it ring. Sometimes it's just this constant strumming on it, but the note itself doesn't change. The point is to become that foundational element, the strong core of the song. The bass typically has these really nice runs to it. I really dig it. They're not always doing these runs. Occasionally they'll line up with what the bass kick is doing, and those moments are super punchy. The production on both the bass kick and the bass guitar are both prominent, with a lot of impact on the initial attack and just a hair bit of reverb to let it come off without ringing too much, right? But it's not dampened enough that there's no decay. It's a short decay off of a strong attack. And so when they both come in at the same time and they're hitting these same beats at the same time, it's this really powerful punchy low end. And that's basically what the bass bounces back and forth between. You either get these nice these really nice low end round warm runs, or you get this just rhythmic attack, usually on just one note, probably following along with what the guitar is doing, or what the chord structure is, and just laying into this one note or this one tone with a rhythmic intensity tied to what the drummer's doing. And then our drums kind of bounce back and forth between these really nice melodic drumming sections. The fills are beautiful. There's that one drum solo section that took us from one of the first or second sections into the next. Just a really great drummer who knows when to rein it in. There's a lot of sections in here where the drummer just kind of lays back and plays, metronome style playing. Just gets into the groove and sits in it. Sits in that pocket perfectly. But when the spotlight's put on the drummer, light goes on them. They're like, I got this. And it's just really gorgeous. I love the way that they flow their drum fills. It's just really nice playing. And they sort of bounce back and forth between it. So we actually see in in all three of these instruments, they have more of a muted secondary function where they fall into a more rhythmic or textual or foundational idea, and then they have a lead function where they play something more melodic. All three of these instruments, and they kind of take turns with this. It's actually really neat to hear how the guitar's got the spotlight 1 second, and then the bass is taking an entire section to do these runs, and then we'll get this gorgeous a drum solo that brings us back into this lead guitar idea. And it's just this really nice cycle of concepts while also providing space for the vocals. The vocals. The vocals. Where are the gorgeous vocals? I will say there's something extremely powerful about this dude's growl. It's very wide. It's weird because it feels like a guttural growl, but it also feels like, a higher fry vocal. It has that clarity of like uh like a fry scream, but with the depth of a false chord growl, if I'm getting these terms correctly. Um, and it, in the same, I had already mentioned that there's a similarity to Tatiana's growl in here. Um, or I guess vice versa. Tatiana has a similar growl to this dude's. And there's something about Tatiana's growls that I can hear, and I think this is the core thing, that it has the depth of a false chord growl, but isn't, because false chord growling tends to bring about muddiness. I don't know if it's the low end. I don't know if it's the technique. I don't know what aspect is, but a lot of it just kind of muddies up into itself, and there's something very clean here that I typically associate with higher fry screams. So it's just a really interesting area like that. But I do have clarity. A couple of sentences I picked up from the vocal work, pretty neat. But it is one tone. Just this is the growl. This is how he does it. Every time he sings, got the one line, the one sound, one growl, and it's just lost all of the dynamics that the vocals were bringing to the table in Coil. Um, And it's just, I wish we would have heard more of the clean vocals, or maybe if, the dude had another style of uh, harshes to move into. I mean, I don't want to compare bands because, they're doing what they're doing. Opeth, I believe, is a pretty big band. I see their name tossed around a lot in the requests. Um, Obviously, they're not doing something wrong. Their audience definitely, enjoys what they're doing. But at least for my personal tastes, I'm not a real big fan of monotonous ideas. I need variety, right? This is something I talk about a lot when I'm talking about, my subjective reaction to a song, or what I enjoy to listen to in my own time. And it's when it comes to harsh vocals, I either need them paired with clean vocals so that I can have melodic elements added to the composition, or I need a variety of harsh vocals. And this is where someone like Will Ramos comes in. I don't know that I would enjoy the new Lorna Shore music as much without Will Ramos there, because he has like 15 voices. Even though it's all harsh, there's a strong variety in it, and it keeps me interested through the songs. And here I almost felt like the vocals just became an atmospheric texture, even though they're given prominence in the mix. I mean, they're above everything. You can't really miss them, but it comes to a point where I just kind of block them out. I don't want to hear them anymore because it's just the same sound over and over and over, and it's trying to deliver a story, I think, based on the couple of lines I picked up from Coil and the couple of lines I picked up here. I think there's a story, like a narration going on, connecting these two songs, but I just could not care to listen to the vocals anymore. I just kind of, when there's a very annoying sound, not that not that this guy's growls are annoying, but bear with me here. When there's a really annoying sound, maybe there's a fire alarm going off or whatever, and like you just want to like hold your ears, and it's annoying and you just wish it would quit. It's the same sound over and over and over, and then you just kind of reach a point where you mentally just kind of block it out, right? You hear it, but you're not processing that you're hearing it. The brain is like discarding that sonic information. That's what started to happen with his vocals. They were there, but I just kind of stopped hearing them because it's just the same thing over and over and over. And again, that's a personal thing. Like I said, Opeth, I think, is a pretty big band. I'm pretty sure they're doing something right there. Just for me personally, though, it did not work with me. And especially coming off of the opening track, Coil, I was really expecting some great vocal work here. I don't mind bringing growls in, but contrast them with something, right? And that's pretty much all of the heavy sections. Now, Heir Apprentice also brings in some quieter, sparser sections, and I enjoyed these quite a bit. We didn't really have a strong timbre range here. We had an acoustic guitar and some drumming sometimes. I think the bass was here in a couple of situations. There were some that were just the acoustic guitar. And like I said, I think we heard strings in one of these maybe. And I really enjoyed what was going on here. It's very strong contrast to the heavier, more textual elements that we heard in other sections. And we got a more of a sense of moving melodic elements, which just were not present too often in the heavy sections. We did have some melodic riffs in the guitar, and some of those licks in the bass that kind of had that really nice movement to them, but none of them were really carrying a melodic edge. They were sort of just heavy riffs that continued on with the heaviness of it all. Um, so we got some really nice melodic moments here, which I felt contrasted very well with the more textual elements. But I just wanted something more. You know, we returned to the sound of Coil, but we didn't bring any of the elements of Coil. We didn't bring any of the beautiful melodies. We didn't bring back the counterpoint. We didn't bring back harmonization. We didn't bring back all the instruments. We just kind of brought back this calmer tone. And I felt it was a real missed opportunity to connect the two tracks. You know, they move right into each other, and yet they feel so disconnected. Um, and again, maybe that's on me. You know, it could be very possible that the two tracks were not originally intended to go together. You know, I guess we'll find out in the lyrics. Something tells me our lyrics are going to be fairly disjointed, just like the music is, and that they wrote an opening track and then they wrote a second track, and they're like, oh, you know, well, let's just tie our intro into our second track. You know, let's not have that gap there. Let's just push them together. And they're not intended to be played together or understood together. I think that's the thing. They're intended to be played together, of course. They're not intended to be understood together, is kind of what I'm thinking here, because there's just no connective tissue between these two. Um, Moving on, though, there is one more section in the song I want to talk about, and that is our guitar solo. I like the guitar solo. It was a bit short, but it had, like I mentioned, a really nice flow. From the beginning of the solo to the end of the solo, I didn't really feel like it was too choppy. I felt like each idea nicely led into the next. When we reached the end of a 4-bar phrase and started the next, like I said, a little choppy, but they made the ideas flow into each other. It wasn't like a hard stop that just started the next idea. But the next idea was also a variation of our previous one, which I really enjoy, having that connective tissue throughout your melodic work that showcases that your later ideas are not isolated, but that they actually have callbacks to earlier ideas. It's just really great, melodic writing that showcases a strong connection from beginning to end. And like I said, short but sweet. I think it was like a whole 8 bars, maybe tops. Showcased a little bit of shredding, introduced some spicy notes. Actually, it's the only time we got any spicy notes. I really missed that from Coil. Coil had some really neat dyads in there, because they pulled some notes from outside the key. And here, pretty much all throughout Heir Apparent, it's all very safely played because it's not about the melody or the harmony. It's about the texture and the atmosphere and the weight of it all. Even the quieter sections were more about contrast than about serving up, melodic components. So hearing the solo kind of pull melodic ideas out of Coil was a really nice callback, but a fair bit too little and a fair bit too late. That solo was like 7 minutes into Heir Apparent. I think that's about it. We covered all the instruments, the 3 styles, some of the things I liked about it, some of the things I didn't like about it, and we covered Coil. So yeah, I guess we're going to get into some lyrics real quick and see what's going on here. We're going to start with Coil, and then we'll move into the next. Coil starts off, she told me why, she told me lies. Always take care of this, I told her how. I've always stayed, always waiting for nothing. When I get out of here, when I leave you behind, I'll find that the years passed us by. And I can see you running through the fields of sorrow. So that's all of the male vocalist right there. And no metaphor here. Well, there's one metaphor, the fields of sorrow, but for the most part, there's no metaphor here. It's very straightforward. She told me lies, but I've always stayed waiting for nothing. But when I get out of here, assuming this relationship, when I leave you behind, confirming when I get out of this relationship, I'll find that the years pass us by. Pretty much says that the time was wasted, right? When I get out of this relationship that you lied to me all throughout, I'll figure out that I've just wasted my time here waiting for nothing. It says, and I can see you running through the fields of sorrow. The way I want to read that is that when he leaves this relationship and ends it, um, you know, he's going to see her uh, sad about it, right? Running through the fields of sorrow, maybe chasing him in a sense, trying to get the relationship to get back together or whatever, but ultimately sad that the relationship is over, even though he just sat there and explained why he wants this relationship to end. Then we get to the female vocals. Says, when you get out of here, when you leave me behind, you'll find that the years passed us by. Well, it just kind of reiterates what he said, and I can see you running through the fields of sorrow. Oh, so she thinks that even though he's breaking up with her or ending the relationship, whatever, that he's going to be also consumed by sorrow as well. So yeah, we have a toxic relationship here filled with lies. Honestly, that's about it. Although it also says I've always stayed waiting for nothing. Could just mean that that's waiting for the lies to end, but also could just be waiting for any type of change, but nothing, no change ever happened to this other person. So staying in a toxic relationship, hoping for change, but never getting it. And it's very one-sided. We don't know if the male vocalist is also toxic, but yeah, that's the whole thing of Coil, which is weird because it's such a beautiful song, right? And the two of them have gorgeous I know we never got to hear them together, but I would, just kind of imagining the two vocals overlaid. I mean, that would have been some really great texture layering right there. But it also wouldn't have made sense because it's about the splitting up of these two people. So, like, I totally get why they didn't go that direction. All right, so our first song is about a failed relationship. Let's move on to Heir Apprentice. Long days, slow waste, so lies, so hate. Really dig that. So long days, slow waste, right? I think that's pretty self-explanatory. Here's the neat thing though, we have so lies, so like to mend, right? Needle and thread, but then so hate, which is like the gardening sewing. Um, Very nice. So you craft lies and create hate, but he used the homonym, homophone. I always forget which one's which. But they sound the same, but are spelled different, have different definitions. Very, very cool. So lies, so hate. Man, that is a good line. So is this talking about the the female character from Coil? Because we've gone back to the ideas of lying. Verse 1. So many years to clean the slate, endless despair within its wake, his touch soiling what used to be clean, his gaze burning on the edge of our dreams. No more. I guess this is not about her. This is a new character. I mean, we have a different vocal too. We went from a male clean in Coil to a male harsh in Heir, so maybe we're speaking through the lens of a different person. Maybe it's not the same narrator. I don't know, man. Anyways, let's ignore the continuity. Like I already said, I didn't figure these two would be similar, so take a new perspective on this. Completely separate idea. There is somebody who creates lies, creates hate, soils what used to be clean, and burns everything on the edge of our dreams. However, we end this verse with no more. There is a resistance to this person who is actively destroying people's lives. Long days, long days. And again he rides in, it's September, and he covets the gullible, skeletal wish hunter. 1,000 lies cast from the throne of secrecy. Hear him spewing forth a meaning to miserable lies. See the twisted hand of doubt seal the affair, the insect trust believer, your body, a vehicle to house his disease. So we have the idea of a throne. We have sealing of an affair, and your body is a vehicle to house his disease. It almost sounds like we're talking. He says he covets the gullible. Sounds like we're speaking about somebody who is trying to or is risen to power already, and they're utilizing falseness. Uh, he covets the gullible, the people that he can pull a fast one on. Almost sounds like they're a con man rising to power. Coveting the gullible to fill them with his lies so that they can house his disease, so that they will be able to perpetrate, his goals through their, how is a nice way to put this? Their gullibility. We're just going to stick with the word that the vocalist used. I have other choice words for people who can't see through obvious lies. Says there's a twisted hand of doubt that seals the affair. The insect trust believer. So yeah, we have this person who, like I said, is trying to rise to power or has risen to power. They sit on a throne of secrecy, and they cast lies into gullible people's minds and allow them to rest there so that these gullible people can push for his agenda as well. Pearls before swine, they are nothing but blind, submit to nothing and swallow my spit of scorn, the invisible king. So this might be somebody who's already risen to power. Procession of woe, struck down by sorrow, a burden so great weighs heavy on old and withered beliefs. The swift solution crumbles beneath the mock notes of a masterpiece. Death in his eyes, waiting, spiraling judgment, provoking in the reins. Actually, this is talking about the invisible king is dying. There's death in his eyes, spiraling. Oh, it's called Heir Apparent. So, okay, there is somebody rising to power, and it's the heir of the king. The feudal test drowned in the levy of deception. In the year of his sovereign, rid us of your judgment, Heir Apparent. So yeah, there's the king dying, and his heir is next in line to take power, and this person is just terrible. Everything that's clean, he touches and soils it. He burns everybody's dreams. He tells thousands of lies and hides them in the gullible so that he can have an army of people who agree with him and can fight his battles for him on the average person, the average citizen, rather than the ruling class. It's not just the citizens versus the rulers. The ruler has infected and housed his disease in some of the the peasants or the lower class, so that they can fight amongst themselves. It's not a unified force versus the ruling class. And verse 3 just says that all that's left between this eventual rise to power is this dying king. The burden that weighs heavy on him. Death in his eyes, waiting, a spiraling judgment provoked in the reins. Yeah, that's a very sad story. Has nothing to do with Coil. Honestly, I have no idea why the two songs move together the way they do, unless maybe the album as a whole makes more sense. I am missing that context. It's very possible that we find out that these two people have something to do with this king, and maybe the story is just told out of order, and you got to figure it out. Wouldn't it be the first album to do it? I don't know. I think that both of the... Well, no, I already said that the first track doesn't have real strong thematic synergy. This one does, mostly. I'd have to go back and really feel out where the lyrics are in some of these sections, but the heavier sections where all of the vocals are, if we completely ignore the quieter, sparser ideas with the more beautiful melodic writing, There's a lot of hate and contempt for this person that is about to rise to power, and a strong resistance towards. Even says at one point, his gaze burning the edge of our dreams, no more. Says, we're going to fight this. At the end says, rid us of your judgment, Heir Apprentice. There is a resistance to it. There are so many elements of the vocals that are aggressive, that are heavy and weighty, and it's this resistance force against this upcoming power that is going to make most people's lives miserable. And in that, I think there's really strong thematic cohesion here. I'm not too sure what those pockets of, sparser, lighter playing are supposed to represent within that. I can't really see a resistance wanting to have moments of calmness or clarity, because any time spent meandering or not taking action is more time for this other person to plan and take power, especially for them to use their power for negative reasons. So, yeah, it's just an interesting song that I feel the music was done for the musical sake of contrasting elements, and the lyrics are put on top of it, and they fit sometimes and don't other times, and that's because the music wasn't expressly created for the lyrics, or for the lyrical themes, I should say. So yeah, those are my thoughts on Opeth's Coil and Heir Apprentice. This is where you guys come in. Hit me up in the comments. Let me know if you enjoyed this one or not, anything that stood out to you. Anything that you'd like to correct me on. I had a lot of questions here, and I probably had a bad read on some of this stuff. So if you have any additional information or context, or anything that you just like to correct me on, go for it. I am interested in that. Above the comment section is a description box, and there is a link for Linktree. Takes you to this menu right here. You can pick up some merch, join the Patreon, and help craft the future of the channel. You can submit special selections, email me, join the Discord, follow me on Twitter, just a lot of stuff. I didn't realize I was behind the menu. I probably should shift myself over when I bring this menu up, because we have a lot of dead space over here, and I'm often finding myself leaning into it and behind it. Anyways, there's a lot of stuff in there. You can go ahead and check it out. Above the description box is some buttons. If you could like, subscribe, and ring the bell, I greatly appreciate all three of those. Alright, we have a special selection as well today. It's Zappa, if I remember correctly. We're going to get some more Zappa in here. Otherwise, I'll be back tomorrow, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 9 p.m. UTC, as usual. We're going to continue on with big shifts and check out another special selection. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.